Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the South Donetsk direction, where the Russians continue offensive operation in the territory of the coal mine South Donbas number 3. And today the Russian sources published another video of how they were attacking the territory. Basically this is the same video that we have already seen. The first time this video appeared in the internet yesterday. The video had poor quality, and now we have more detailed observations of the situation and this attack operation itself. As you can see from the south eastern part, the Russians answered the territory of the South Donbas coal mine with just 3 personnel carriers. The Russians began suppressing fire, trying to pin down the Ukrainians. Then the Russians most likely landed in this territory and captured some buildings. From the western part, there was another group of Russian soldiers that were heading towards this coal mine South Donbas number 3. The Russians also landed in the central part, and the heavy clashes began. So currently we don't know for sure whether the Russians managed to establish a complete control over the territory or not, but most likely, due to the fact that we still haven't received any video with the Russian flag, most likely there are still very heavy clashes, because the Ukrainians understand if they lose the South Donbas coal mine number 3, then most likely they will lose the entire Ugledar direction. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Pokrovsk direction. According to information we have, the situation for the Ukrainians is very difficult and critical. Russian troops assault Ukraine positions with small groups, and often they're not accompanied by armored vehicles, soldiers says. They send 2 or 3 people who try to reach a certain point in the field, and then others try to get to that point as well. And when they have 10-15 people, they try to attack us. So this is something like a description that was provided by the soldier 33rd Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine about the work of Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group. Obviously, the Russians managed to improve their tactics significantly, and currently the Ukrainians haven't managed to find a solution how to adopt and how to fight this. And the problem about why the Russians are so successful is the significant lack of manpower and forces in this direction. For example, BBC also reported that the situation is critical. A Ukrainian military officer in the east told the BBC near the front line south of Pokrovsk, Ukraine simply does not have enough troops to defend the whole line, and Russia keeps stretching the line on purpose, and Ukraine keeps running into this trap. So the thing is that Ukrainians have certain, let's say, number of soldiers that they need to stretch along the line, and the Russians are using the tactics when they send through a lots of groups of 2-3 soldiers, and when they see the weak point of armored forces Ukraine, they start consolidation and taking under control these points after another attack. So this is the tactics, and we see that this tactics works. Now let's talk about the main directions, and interesting updates are coming from Ukrainsk. There are still very heavy clashes. The Ukrainians are saying that in Ukrainsk rearguard battles continue in the central, northern and the western parts of the city. There are also Ukrainian blocked units in the city. Work is currently underway to unblock them. There was something similar in Novohrodivka. The Ukrainian soldiers were unblocked, but the city was occupied in 96 hours. So there are still Ukrainian soldiers who currently located on the territory of the coal mine, most likely, and on the landfill. The Russians managed to encircle them, or at least to create operational encirclement. At least this information also was confirmed by different neutral mappers. And now the main purpose of the Ukrainians is not to restore control over the city. Obviously they are not able to do this. The most important thing that Ukrainians are trying to complete right now is to create a safe road for evacuation. We'll see, because obviously the situation can't continue longer, let's say, or can't continue endless, and most likely today or tomorrow the situation with the Ukrainians will be resolved, and obviously in Russian favor. As for Selido, we haven't received anything. The Pokrovsk, the Ukrainians continue concentration of their forces around the northwestern part of Novohrodivka. Today we got additional batch of videos of how the Russians were FPV droning the Ukrainian forces that are trying to concentrate around the northwestern part. And as we discussed in the previous video, most likely the Ukrainians during the next 48-72 hours will make first attempt to counter counterattack in this direction with the purpose to cut the city of Novohrodivka into somewhere in the central part. This is the vital question for the Ukrainians because they need to restore control over the landfills, they need to entrench their positions and to wait for the Russians. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Chasiv Yar direction where the Russians continue advancing. And today we got very important publication made by neutral mappers. According to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly in the southwestern direction of Ivanovska and in the northwestern direction of Glushkova. Basically, this forest was captured by the Russians during the previous 24-48 hours. Significant progress, as you can see. Furthermore, according to different mappers, the Russians managed to cross Seversky Donetsk-Donbas canal and basically began offensive operation on the Ukrainian side. This is very important progress. The thing is that we just a few days ago, for the previous few days, we've been talking a lot about the Russian progress in the vicinity of Grigorovka, and the Russians took under control this dense network of fortifications. Most likely currently the Russians in this flank are focused to take under control this part and this complex network of trenches, and as soon as the Russians are able to do this, as we discussed in the previous videos, the Russians will try to cross Seversky Donetsk-Donbas canal from the northern part and then to attack Chasiv Yar from the north. So as you can see, the Russians are about to finish the preparation before the beginning of the full-scale offensive operations towards the city of Chasiv Yar from the north and from the south. Most likely this military campaign is going to take place somewhere during the winter. As for the geolocations, we have just one. In this video we can see a Russian soldier that was destroying Ukrainian positions along the railways, and he dropped grenade and then there was a very heavy explosion that later the Russian soldiers secured the territory. Now let's move further. As for Siversk direction, we haven't received anything special. As for the southern Kupiansk direction, we have another Russian full-scale offensive operation. The Ukrainian sources reported that the Russian armed forces have advanced north of Makiivka. The Ukrainian armed forces are transferring additional reserves to the area, which include many volunteers and mercenaries. As for the geolocations, as you can see, we have lots of them, and we have the video that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources. In this video we can see the Russian attack when the Russians were using up to 5 or 10 personal carriers and armored vehicles and significant number of infantry. The Ukrainians were trying to stop and to slow down the Russians with FPV drones, and most likely they managed to damage some vehicles and to destroy some infantry, but despite the damage the Ukrainians managed to deal the Russians managed to cross the river, Zhiribets river, and to improve their positions in the northwestern part of Makiivka. We have geolocation that confirms this. In this video we can see Ukrainian FPV drone that was hunting the Russians that was running back to the base. He was attacked exactly in this point, and based on this video we have adjusted the map. And the most important, most likely the Russians have already established complete control over this part of Makiivka region, because the Russian soldier was running somewhere from this field. We haven't received any geolocation that can confirm this, but we're making this conclusion based on the facts and based on the reports we received during the previous 24 hours. Obviously significant progress, and obviously the Russians are trying to take under control the fields between these salient and Russian positions to the west of Karamzinovka and Novohrodivka. Now let's move further. Let's talk a bit about the Pishana flower. The flower is blooming. The flower continues blooming. We have another changes on the ground according to different mappers. During the previous 24 or 48 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions between these fields. And now let's move further. Also, neutral mappers confirmed that the Russians answered the village of Petropavlovka. The Russians managed to take control over the first buildings, and currently there are very heavy clashes. Now let's go to the Kursk direction, where the very heavy clashes continue. We have additional updates, and during the previous 24 hours the Russian sources published significant number of videos and geolocated videos of how they were attacking, destroying Ukrainian vehicles in the fields in the Kursk direction. Lots of artillery systems, lots of personal carriers and tanks were destroyed by the Russians as a result of Lancet strike, as a result of FPV drone strikes. The Ukrainians suffer losses. Currently the Ukrainians are no longer available to evacuate vehicles, and armor from this direction, as well as they can't get additional batch inside because the risks are very heavy. Now the Ukrainians prefer to keep their forces on the Ukrainian side of the border and to support Ukrainians in this side of the border just with small group of arms and vehicles and troops. In this video we can see the rotation process. The Russians managed to discover and to attack the Ukrainians while evacuation and rotation. Maybe in this video we can see already the process how the Ukrainians tried to withdraw their positions and to escape a cauldron, because this video took place exactly in the along the line of combat contact. As for additional changes on the ground, the Russians finally we got some geolocations, some confirmations from different mappers. The Russians during the previous 24 hours took under control the fields between the Byachova, Bukhovka and Oleinikova and the village of Darina. Furthermore, the Russians neutral mappers are saying that the Russians entered the village of Darina, and according to these updates we can say that the Russians crossed the river, which is very important. Ukrainians most likely will try to counterattack the Russian positions on the Ukrainian side of the river, because it's a vital question to control the river and not to allow the Russians to cross this water barrier. We have additional photos of destroyed Russian vehicles. In this video we can see Russian personal carrier that was destroyed as a result of Ukraine FPV drone strike. Now let's talk about Glushkova area, the territory where the Ukrainians tried to counterattack the Russians with the purpose to slow them down. In the Kursk direction we have some posts. In the Glushkovsky district the situation is stable for now. That was stated by the Russian sources, but Ukraine attempts is quite persistent. Reserves have been sent to Russian soldiers, and with the support of aviation the Russians managed to maintain the distance with the Ukrainian armored forces at 1.52 kilometers. Furthermore, we have reports that there are ongoing clashes in Vysyoly. The Ukrainian armored forces are consolidating. But the problem is that today, for example, we got another video of how the Ukrainians were attacking, but it's already third day passed since the beginning of Ukrainian offensive operation, but we're still receiving the same video that we got 3 days ago. So the same story, the Ukrainians are clearing the trenches, the Ukrainians are clearing in the mining fields, then the Ukrainian forces are entering the territory of Glushkova. So nothing special, nothing huge, just the same video from another angle with better quality and so on. Another video where we can see the clashes between the Russians and the Ukrainians along the border, but no changes on the ground. So most likely this counter-attack or this attack of the armored forces of Ukraine failed, and they will not be able to improve their positions as they wanted. And now we start to see more and more talks about 2025. Zelensky has already provided Biden the business plan for 2025 with a list of targets. He was asking United States of America to allow Ukrainians to attack, and according to information we have and according to Ukrainian intelligence, the Russians are planning to finish the special military operation in the end of 2025, in the end of 2026, because according to Ukrainian intelligence, the Russians will begin suffering significant problems in their economy starting of the summer of 2025. And as for the 2025 in Ukraine, there will be also no presidential elections in Ukraine in 2025. The draft of the 2025 state budget has nothing included regarding the possible holding of elections. So Zelensky is going to continue extending the martial law, and there are going to be no president. Probably he's going to be the last one. And that's it for this video. Military summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.